Welcome to Your Need to Know. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and tonight we're talking with Dorothy Keenan. She is the founder and executive director of GrandInvolve. This organization places active older adults into the classrooms of Title I elementary schools here in Fairfax County, working with some of our most educationally vulnerable students here in the county. Thanks so much for being here, Dot. It is great to have you on the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So I guess we should do a disclosure disclaimer. I'm on the board of GrandInvolve, so I'm not like a dispassionate, objective third party here. I have not been with Dot from the beginning, but I have been on the board for the last 3 years, and I have loved every minute of the mission this organization has been on to pair active older adults in our county with educationally vulnerable children in our county's elementary schools. So I'd like to give Dot an opportunity to talk a little bit about how you came up with this idea. Where did this idea of GrandInvolve come from?
I have always been a volunteer since I was a child. And my first volunteer experience was an intergenerational experience. I loved being with older adults. And I discovered this when I was 12. And my Girl Scout troop had adopted a grandmother in a local nursing home who had no family and no visitors. Well, the other girls got tired of visiting grandma, but I loved visiting grandma and I continued. My mom would bring me there to visit her on a regular basis. I loved hearing her stories. And then when I could drive on my own, I would keep on visiting her. I would drive over and see her. So I've been involved in intergenerational volunteering from a very young age. And this actually gave me the idea of my career. I've worked with older adults my entire life since I'm 16 in my first job. And this came from my love of being with grandma and hearing her stories and just love being with older adults. So this has been a lifelong dream of mine to have an intergenerational program like this. And I retired 11 years ago from Fairfax County, where I was the supervisor of senior services. And I oversaw the 13 at that time it was 13 senior centers. And each senior center had an intergenerational program of some sort. So this has always been a dream of mine to do this, even in retirement.
And so so it's an encore career, and I love how it's referred to as having an encore career. When you say you retired sort of from your county job, that wasn't really the end of your career, because then you went on to do classes on retirement, helping people
That's
to
right.
transition, right? Like you're retired, you're not dead yet. So really you have to plan for what you're going to do next. And so that was sort of this interim career you had, um,
Yes.
advising people, what will you do in your retirement? And so take us from that point at which you're counseling people to how
Mhm.
you ended up founding GrandInvolve in 2014.
Well, our retirement classes were multiple days long or multiple hours. And one of the segments was about volunteering. And we strongly advised everybody who was retiring to have some kind of a passion, something that they love doing, whether it's a hobby or volunteering or part-time work, work being with their grandchildren. But whatever, we really encourage people to volunteer. So when the county was looking at um, how to encourage older adults to stay in our county and make this a more livable community for more ages, they asked me to sit on one of the teams. And this is when I was still at that time teaching the retirement classes. So we came up with, my small group came up with the idea of GrandInvolve. And like I said, I always loved the idea of intergenerational volunteering. And when my own grandchildren were entered into kindergarten, I volunteered in their classroom. I loved it. And this is what gave us the idea of GrandInvolve. So it's not about grandparenting. It's about a grand idea for people of a grand age. And that's where we came up with the name GrandInvolve, and people being involved at their grand age.
Well, it's caught on because prior to the pandemic, and we'll talk a little bit about how that kind of was a hiccup in the progress of your mission. Um, you had like 165 volunteers
That's right.
in 24 Title I elementary schools. But you had a core team, and they are wonderful people. I have worked with them on leadership teams that started at Crestwood. And the
That's
success at
right.
Crestwood, really talk a little bit about that too, because that is definitely sort of the marquee school of your program because it was the first one. But at the point at which the schools were closed, there were an unbelievable number of volunteers at Crestwood and people who continued to want to volunteer there.
Well, we started at Crestwood, it's 8 years ago now. We're in our 8th year. And in the very beginning, people who had taken my retirement classes and I had contacted them were interested in the GrandInvolve idea. And we had, I think, 7 volunteers that first year at Crestwood. We became very involved in the school. And we had actually asked the school staff what were their goals for volunteers being in the school. And they had mentioned that they were hoping that families would become more involved in after school and evening activities. So not only that first year did we volunteer in the classroom, but we were very involved in the after school and the evening programs. And to this day, our volunteers at any of the schools continue to be involved in after school and evening activities as part of our GrandInvolve experience. But our primary mission is to be in the classroom with children. So as I said, we had about 7 volunteers that first year. And the second year, we had been so successful at GrandInvolve, we decided to expand. We had 3 schools our second year, and then we have continued to expand so that now at Crestwood, before pandemic, there were over 30 volunteers at Crestwood at that point. So once the pandemic hit, and this was in March 2 years ago, we did have over 200 volunteers when you considered how many leadership volunteers we had in addition to classroom volunteers. And we all pivoted immediately to how can we continue to help these children. So last year, we were able to do some online volunteering, virtual volunteering, and we did have volunteers in 9 schools last year doing virtual volunteering, and also did some volunteering within some local nonprofits that also were looking for virtual volunteers. So we successfully pivoted, and this year we are back in the classrooms. Our volunteers are delighted to be back in the classrooms. So we right now have about 50 volunteers going into classrooms. We will continue to grow that number this year. And we hope that next year we will be back to normal once all the children have been vaccinated. We really would love to be back in all the schools. Our original plan was to be in all Title I schools within 10 years. And that's set back a little bit, maybe a year or 2, but we do still intend to be in every Title I school in Fairfax County. So there are over 140 elementary schools in Fairfax County, and many people are surprised to hear that there are over 40 Title I schools. And we are right now in 25 of those schools, and we continue to grow our partnerships with different schools. We're in all of the schools in South County, many of the schools in the eastern part of the county, and some in the north and the east part of the county, but we continue to grow the number of schools that we're working in.
It's an ambitious goal, and yet every school that GrandInvolve has been in, the teachers have been very enthusiastic. The principals have been very enthusiastic, and it is kind of a challenge to be an all-volunteer organization and to manage both the onboarding of the volunteers, the processing of volunteers, which includes an orientation and a background check. And so, so if people have never volunteered in the schools before or have not volunteered in any capacity other than as a parent, then there is a process. And so you have a really terrific group of volunteers who, from the minute people express an interest via email or online, and back in the day, we used to have events, in-person events, where people could come if they were interested in volunteering. You've got a group of volunteers that do the intake and the onboarding, and then match these volunteers out to the schools that have expressed an interest. And I might add, the principals sometimes change over the summer from one principal to the next. So you always have a lot of balls in the air. There's always a lot that has to be managed when you talk about an effort this large with this many people and this many schools.
Well, I really want to say kudos to our volunteer coordinator, Patty Smith, who is just wonderful. Patty Stevens. Patty does a great job matching volunteers to the school, and it has been a real challenge because last year the schools that people usually volunteer at might not have been available, and they switched schools back to another school this year. So it has been challenging doing the matching, but we have a bunch of really wonderful, knowledgeable, enthusiastic, passionate volunteers who are in our leadership. In fact, last year during COVID and during the pandemic, we were holding about 9 meetings per week on Zoom, planning how we were going to proceed virtually. And we still have over 40 leadership volunteers. And we have a tier of volunteers, our volunteer coordinator, and then we have regional volunteers who look over all the schools in their region. And then we have a lead volunteer at every school who we call our SAT, it's our volunteer liaison. Each school has a lead volunteer that coordinates the efforts at that school. So you can see that it's quite a
it's a big group effort.
It is a big effort.
It is a big group effort. We're going to take a quick break, but please join us after this break when we talk further with Dot Keenan, who is the founder and executive director of GrandInvolve.
As they head toward the finish, Warren has built a substantial lead and headed for her 4th gold medal.
She's ahead of the world record pace by at least half a second, and she... Oh, wait, what's she doing?
I think she's doing a headstand. Why would she do that?
She's stopping. She stopped.
I've never seen
She was so
anything
close
like
to the
this.
finish, and she stopped. I mean,
I don't know what she's thinking.
Unbelievable. Yeah, I've never...
Dare to load their minds. Dare to explore. Dare to STEM. Learn more at She Can STEM.
It's time to make an informed decision about COVID-19 vaccines. The dangerous new Delta variant is more than twice as contagious as the original virus and can affect anyone. Right now, 9 out of 10 hospitalizations and deaths from COVID are among unvaccinated people. Getting vaccinated might save your life, and there's now an option that's fully approved by the FDA. Learn more at getvaccineanswers.org.
Welcome back to Your Need to Know. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and tonight we're talking with Dorothy Keenan. She is the founder and the executive director of GrandInvolve, an organization that puts active older adults into the classrooms, the Title I classrooms of Fairfax County Public Schools. Thank you so much for being here, Dot. I know that people are interested in knowing how you've managed to build and grow this organization for the last 8 years. And I hope some of the people watching will ask themselves if this is a volunteer opportunity that's right for them. If someone were to say, it sounds like something I want to do, what would it look like for someone to go through the process of becoming a GrandInvolve volunteer?
Well, we would ask that you go visit our website, www.grandinvolve.org, and look at that website. And on our website, there's a place for you to add that you are interested in becoming a volunteer, or even in just receiving our newsletter. But if you'd like to become a volunteer, sign up on our website. You can give an idea of what schools you might be interested in volunteering at. We have a list of all the schools that we're involved with. And after you fill out that form, you will automatically receive information about our next information session and our next orientation. So then you can attend an information session in which you will find out lots of information about the history and the goals and the what we're doing currently in the schools. And then we will also invite you to an orientation. And this will give you specifics about how you have to register on our volunteer background, and you have to register on Better Impact, and then you will also be required to have a background check. The schools pay for your background check, and this is a process which we will help you through. Everything is being done online, and you just have to go into the business office to give your fingerprints, and then within a month, you should be able to volunteer at one of our schools. Once you're in a school, we will have our lead volunteer from that school work with you to help you make a decision about what times you'd like to be volunteering. And I also would like to let people know that our schools know and understand that our volunteers are active older adults. And we frequently go away in the winter, have new responsibilities of a grandchild or and a parent that needs some assistance. And our schools are very flexible with how many times you come in. We do ask that people volunteer at least an hour a week. Most of our volunteers give 2 to 3 hours a week. That would be the average. And most of our volunteers do take off every winter for a week or two, and this is perfectly all right. So that's how you go about becoming a volunteer. And I'd like to tell you about what kinds of things you can do in the classroom too. So once you're in the classroom, it's you and the teacher making a decision about what you'll do with the students. And each time you go in, it might be different. But many of our volunteers are reading volunteers. And the teacher will assign you or assign a student or to you. Usually you work with the student for about 20 minutes. That's their attention span. And they'll bring over their reading books that they're working with currently, and you'll have them read to you. And then you'll help them with words they do not know. You might also do some reading comprehension and ask them about the story and what was the beginning, what was the story about, who were the main characters, and introduce these words to them. So many of our volunteers work with the younger grades, and many of our volunteers are reading volunteers. You also might be a math volunteer. So I've done this many times where the teacher gives me a math game, and you play an actual game with the children to help them understand addition, subtraction, and the children know how the game goes. So it's not like you have to know or understand the game. The children will tell you the rules. And in that case, you might be working with a small group of children. So I'd say most of the time we work with an individual or a small group of children. The teacher might have something special that she would like you to do. Like, I can remember many times I'd be in the classroom and the teacher would say, the children have to write a story about what they did this weekend. And some of them are just having a little trouble remembering what they did over the weekend. So I'd go from student to student, we talk a little bit, and I would help to spark their imagination so that they would understand what kind of a story they could write. So there are many different things you can do. You might actually be doing a science project with the children. So every time you go, it could be different, or every time you go, it could be the same as in reading. The teachers are so appreciative, and the children are so excited when we come to their classrooms.
Well, that is the gift. And there's a lot of people who seem to hesitate to think that they don't have the skills necessary to do a particular kind of volunteering. But the gift here is actually your time and attention. Having caring adults show up and be able to give undivided attention and patience and caring to children who need a little extra help or who might be struggling, that is the gift itself. And so I do hope that people understand that there's no particular qualifications. And as you pointed out, you don't even have to be a grandparent. You
Right.
just have to want to give your undivided, caring, patient attention to children who need a little extra help. And I have to say, I think that the literacy piece of it is very important. And I think it's one of the reasons that Volunteer Fairfax recognized GrandInvolve with their Literacy and Education Group Award in 2021. The efforts that GrandInvolve has made definitely has supported literacy in our public schools. I'll also mention that the Governor's Award for Volunteerism and Community Service was also bestowed upon GrandInvolve in 2017. And there's been numerous other awards, including this year, one for you, Dot, from the Fairfax County Federation of Citizens Associations for your work in the community. So over the years, the Virginia Council of Aging has recognized GrandInvolve with the Best Practices Award. The organization is well known. It's very credible. And there's school board members and there's board of supervisor members who have been with GrandInvolve almost from the beginning and are champions of the program. So I hope that, if you are interested in finding out more about GrandInvolve, it's grandinvolve.org. But that only tells half the story. The volunteers themselves are the best sources, are some of the funniest stories about working with children you can possibly imagine. But one of the things that intrigued me is the knitting club, and the fact that the knitting club was a way to engage the children after school and also serve the purpose of parents coming to pick them up in the afternoons and getting to know each other. As you just sort of this wonderful unintended consequence. So tell us a little bit about the very popular knitting program.
People are very surprised to find out how popular the knitting program is with girls and boys. Each time, I think we have 2 or 3 semesters of knitting club after school. It started at Crestwood, but I believe we're also in several other schools. We have on an average of 50 children signing up for this program at one time. And the same 50 children will sign up the next time. And the really nice part about this, other than that the families are becoming more involved in the school, is that the children are becoming friends outside of the classroom. So the children are making friends, which could last a lifetime. Some of these children, when I went to look in on the knitting program, they were doing things I couldn't believe, following patterns, and working on their own on knitting projects. That is one of the very successful after-school programs, and knitting is very popular with children right now.
And that's so funny because you hear a lot about STEM after school and STEAM after school, but you don't hear a lot about knitting. And I think people need to look at that again. So if you're a knitter out there and you're like, oh, teaching children to knit, I could do that. Well,
That's right.
There's a place for you at GrandInvolve. I also want to mention too that GrandInvolve, along with all the other accolades and awards that have been garnered over the years, was selected by Burke and Herbert Bank this year to be the recipient of their annual Scores for Kids program, which is something they do in conjunction with the Washington Capitals hockey team and with the NBC Sports Washington. And so this season, in the regular season, for every goal that the Capitals score, GrandInvolve will get $100 toward our mission of expanding our program in every Title I elementary school in Fairfax County. So I do hope that our viewers will lend an ear and see if they can catch the mentions that GrandInvolve gets throughout the season, all the way through to April. And to learn more about our program, I think it's really important that people understand how many opportunities there are to be involved. And so going into January 2022, what do you see in 2022 as far as expanding the program?
Well, we are right now looking to expand in the Mason Magisterial District. And Mason Magisterial District has the most Title I schools of any magisterial district. I think there's 11, might be 12 schools that are Title I schools. And we are in right now, I think it's 4. So we are looking to expand into those other schools and then look at the north part of the county and start expanding there. So we have regional coordinators who are working to set up new programs in these schools. We really hope to be in all the Title I schools within 12 years now of our beginning. So I guess we're looking at 2026 or something like that. But we love being in the Title I schools, and we feel that this is not only an intergenerational program, but an intercultural program. We feel that our older adults have a much better understanding of the challenges that children face who do not speak English at home, especially for our immigrant families. Our older adults have a much better understanding of the community that they live in and the people that populate this community that we may not encounter on a day-to-day basis. So it's a wonderful program. Might also add that GrandInvolve being intergenerational is beneficial for the older adults too. Studies have shown that there are health benefits to having a purposeful a passion in your life and something that you're doing that you really feel is very important. This will help your well-being.
And I think that is the perfect note on which to end this show. Thank you
Okay.
so much, Dot. And this is what you need to know.